The camera finds it in shadow, a single granite block half submerged in dark water, edges emerging like a drowned monument. This single piece weighs somewhere between 60 and 100 tons. It is 7 meters long. The joints are so tight that when you run your fingers along the seam, the shadow disappears. Each block outweighs a modern battle tank. The precision approaches what you would expect from industrial stone milling, not Bronze Age masonry. The official story moves fast. It credits Old Kingdom construction, Seti I's symbolic tomb, and granite quarried at Aswan, hauled 500 kilometers upriver on sledges and by manpower. But there is a problem. No tool marks. Not where it matters, not on the bearing surfaces where copper chisels should have left their signature. And if this granite floor is older than the temple built around it, then the entire Abydos timeline does not just shift, it destabilizes. If this floor is older than the god it honors, who built it, and why does the math refuse to cooperate? The Osirion sits 15 meters below ground level, a sunken basin of cyclopean granite wrapped in a later shell of limestone. You descend into it. The waterline cuts across the blocks, groundwater seeping up from the Nile water table, which should not surprise anyone. What should surprise you is that someone planned for this. They built a structure designed to sit below the water table. Granite stacked without mortar, block against block, weight against weight. The official record attributes it to Seti I's 13th century BCE, part of his mortuary complex at Abydos, a symbolic recreation of Osiris's primordial tomb. That's the story. But foundation engineering at this depth in saturated ground requires thinking most Bronze Age builders supposedly did not possess. This was not built to be buried. It was built to stay put, and someone knew exactly where the water would rise. Red Aswan granite, not decorative veneer, but structural and load-bearing. The quarry sits over 500 kilometers upriver. The official method is to float it down the Nile during inundation, offload it onto sledges, and drag it into place. That sounds reasonable until you calculate the turning radius for an 80-ton block on a barge, or consider the docking infrastructure needed to transfer that weight onto land without the barge capsizing or the bank collapsing. Later Egyptian temples built by dynasties with more resources, better tools, and established logistics, actively avoid using granite at this scale. They use it for columns, for obelisks, for decoration, not for foundation platforms, not in masses like this. Look at the New Kingdom temples. Limestone dominates, granite accents. The Osirion does the opposite. Egypt knew granite. Egypt transported granite, but Egypt avoided using it like this, which makes you wonder, was this the exception or the inheritance? Stand at the joint between two blocks. Run your hand along the seam. The shadow disappears. The gap, if there is one, measures less than half a millimeter. Photogrammetry scans confirm it. The tolerances are tighter than most modern masonry. The official claim is stone-on-stone dressing with hand tools. Pound the surface flat with dolerite hammers. Grind it smooth with sand and water. Then stack the blocks and let gravity do the rest. Except granite registers 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Copper tools, the bronze chisels Egypt was supposedly using, max out around 3.5. You can abrade granite, you can fracture it by percussion, but achieving planar flatness across a 7-meter surface, repeated across dozens of blocks with sub-millimeter tolerances, that is not decorative, that is structural. Precision this tight is not about aesthetics, it is about distributing load. This raises the question, what load were they planning for? Look closer at the granite faces, the ones bearing the weight. No percussion scars, no chisel chatter, smooth planar surfaces that catch the light evenly. The surface flatness exceeds typical Old Kingdom granite work by a measurable margin. The official explanation invokes lost finishing techniques, methods that vanished without leaving a manual, without leaving failed attempts, without leaving the intermediate stages you would expect from a learning curve. Experimental archaeology has tried. Teams using period-accurate tools have dressed granite. The results are competent, but rough. Nothing approaches the Osirion's finish. And here's the thing. You can claim lost skills, invoke forgotten mastery, suggest techniques erased by time. But physics still invoices you. Granite doesn't care about your narrative. It responds to force, to abrasion, to tool hardness. If the tools leave no mark, then either the tools were something else or the marks were erased, and erasing them uniformly across this scale is a problem all its own. The access trench around the Osirion is narrow, confined. You are trying to maneuver 100-ton blocks through a space that does not forgive mistakes. The ground is Nile silt, saturated, and compressible. Consider the numbers. A sledge loaded with 80 tons applies ground pressure that exceeds the silt's load-bearing capacity. Even with water lubrication, the methods shown in tomb paintings, the friction, the incline, and the available manpower do not align. Logistics simulations struggle to make it work without modern equipment. And then there is the spatial problem. The basin is rectangular. The blocks had to turn. Pivot points require clearance. Where did they turn? Where is the evidence of ramps, platforms, and staging areas? Later temples have those features. At those sites we find construction debris, ramp remnants, and tool caches. The Osirion's immediate surroundings are clean. Even if you could move such blocks, the question remains, how did they navigate the final approach? The granite core sits deeper than it needs to. The foundation extends below the level of nearby temples, which were built centuries later by dynasties with sophisticated engineering traditions. The official story frames this as symbolic. Osiris ruled the underworld, so his temple descends into the earth. Poetic, thematically appropriate, but overbuilt. Foundation, depth correlates with load distribution and ground stability. You go deep when you are planning for vertical stress, seismic stability, or long-term settlement. The Osirion's foundation solves engineering problems that the symbolic narrative does not require. It is not just deep, it is precise. The granite platform is level, the blocks interlock, the weight distributes evenly across a saturated substrate. This is structural thinking, not ritual theater. You do not engineer this carefully unless the structure demands it. And here is the uncomfortable part. This solves problems no one was supposed to have yet, at least not according to the timeline we have been told. The granite core speaks one language, the limestone casing speaks another. Stand back and compare them. The granite blocks average 10 times the volume of the limestone masonry added later. Different scale, different tolerances, different logic. The official framing treats this as a stylistic choice. Seti I wanted a dramatic contrast between the eternal granite core and the decorated limestone superstructure. But construction signatures don't lie. The granite shows no tool marks, joints tight enough to trap shadow. The limestone is standard New Kingdom work, competent but conventional. Chisel marks, mortar joints, human scale. Two different builders would leave exactly this pattern, same site. Two grammars. And the granite came first. It has to have come first, because the limestone encases it, leans against it, references it. The temple was built around something already there, which means the question is not when Seti I built the Osirion. The question is what he found. Water tells stories that inscriptions do not. The granite shows erosion, smoothing, and surface degradation, the kind of weathering you get from prolonged water exposure. The limestone shows damage too, but different, sharper, more recent. Differential weathering rates suggest the granite was exposed longer before the limestone enclosed it. The official explanation points to groundwater damage. The block sat in a saturated environment for millennia, and that is a reasonable account. Except the erosion patterns predate the limestone enclosure. You can see it in the transition zones where limestone abuts granite. The granite weathering extends under the limestone joints, meaning the granite was already worn when the limestone was added. The stone remembers what the records don't. It remembers sitting exposed, open to elements, water flowing past, before anyone built a temple around it. How long, the rock won't say, but it wasn't built and immediately buried. It had a life before Seti I claimed it. Construction leaves evidence. Ramps, debris fields, worker housing, tool caches, pottery shards from the crew's meals. Later Egyptian temples have all of this. We can trace the construction sequence, identify the quarries, map the labor organization. The Osirion has none of it. no construction ramps at the scale required, no debris field matching the volume of stone moved, no worker camp sized for a project this ambitious. The estimated build time, assuming period-accurate methods, does not fit comfortably within Seti Wuai's reign. He ruled for roughly 15 years, much of it spent on military campaigns. Even if every available year was dedicated to the Osirion, the logistics timeline compresses uncomfortably. You need time to quarry, time to transport, time to dress and fit, time to stack and stabilize. The calendar starts shrinking, and when the calendar shrinks, someone's math is wrong. Either the methods were different or the timeline is. The Osirion does not align with Seti Dharam's temple. It is off, several degrees out of true, with the main temple axis. Walk the site and you will feel it. The temple flows north-south with ritual precision. The Osirion sits at an angle like someone built around it but could not quite correct the orientation. This misalignment is hard to miss. The official claim is an intentional, symbolic offset, that ancient architects chose the misalignment for theological reasons we no longer fully understand. That is possible. Egyptian religion was complex, layered, and coded, but Egyptian temples are also famous for obsessive alignment. Solar axes, stellar sightlines, processional perfection. When alignment mattered, and it almost always mattered, Egypt delivered. The Osirion is the exception. Or it is not Seti I's design. Reuse leaves fingerprints. When you build around something older, orientation errors accumulate. The new structure respects the old, but cannot fully integrate it. Same site, different generations, different purposes. The Osirion isn't alone. The Valley Temple at Giza, same Cyclopean granite, same tight joints, same absence of obvious tool marks. Baalbek in Lebanon, foundation stones exceeding 1,000 tons, fitted with similar precision. Ollantaytambo in Peru, and the site, blocks shaped and stacked with tolerances that baffle modern engineers. Different continents, different cultures, same signature. The mainstream explanation fragments here: independent invention, parallel development, convergent evolution of technique. Each site gets its own story, but the construction signatures echo. Massive stones, minimal tool marks, precision joints, foundation platforms that predate the structures built on top. You can dismiss one site as an anomaly, two sites as coincidence. But when the pattern repeats globally, dismissal starts sounding like avoidance. Patterns don't need myths to be suspicious. They just need attention. And the attention keeps circling back to the same uncomfortable question: who taught the technique? Or who left the examples? The inscriptions at Abydos describe ritual and theology, the journey of Osiris through death and resurrection. What they do not describe is construction. There are no quarry logs, no workforce records, no architectural plans, and no commemorative texts celebrating the engineering triumph. Egypt documented everything important: pyramid construction, temple dedications, quarry expeditions. The records are obsessive, detailed, proud. But for the Osirion, there is silence. The official defense is record loss, papyri decayed, inscriptions weathered, archives burned. That is always possible, but Egypt carved records into stone specifically to defy time. When they built something ambitious, they bragged. The Great Pyramid has graffiti from work gangs. Hatshepsut's obelisks record transport inscriptions. Ramesses II never shut up about anything. Seti I's son inherited that tradition, yet the Osirion, an engineering marvel, gets theological poetry and construction silence. Silence can be data, especially when it is this loud. The granite core is likely older than the temple built around it. That much the evidence suggests. Does this prove a lost civilization? No. Does it prove advanced technology? Not necessarily. What it proves is that the official story, neat, linear, all Egyptian, all Dynasty 19, does not explain everything. The current Old Kingdom toolset, as demonstrated experimentally, has not successfully reproduced the Osirion precision at the Osirion scale. That is not mythology. That is replication failure. This problem echoes globally. Similar unresolved foundations underpin structures from Egypt to Peru to Lebanon to Easter Island. Maybe Egypt inherited the Osirion. Maybe they found it, understood its significance, and built their temple around something already sacred, already ancient. If Egypt inherited this, then the question shifts. The measurements are real. The precision is documented. The timeline wobbles. Who built the inheritance? The camera returns to where it started. Waterline cutting across granite. Shadow trapped in the joint. Or maybe there is no gap, just the illusion of one. The block is still there, unmoved, patient, heavier than the explanations we have stacked on top of it. 60 tons of red granite that traveled 500 kilometers, shaped to sub-millimeter precision with tools that should not have worked, placed in a foundation deeper than necessary, then enclosed centuries later in limestone that does not quite align. The stone was placed first, the myth was added later, and between the placement and the myth, something got lost or deliberately left out. The measurements are real, the precision is documented, the official story sounds clean, authoritative, settled, but the explanation still is not, and maybe that is the point. Maybe the mystery is not what they built, it is what we are still refusing to measure.